So we live in a world of duality. And in this world of duality, there are things that are good and there are things that are bad. There are things we like and there are things we don't like. There are things we agree with, things we disagree with. And all of that is the cause of so much of turmoil in our mind. It's either the cause of conflict, it's the cause of fear, it's the cause of so many different experiences that we have. Imagine a world without duality, where you neither liked something nor disliked something, where you agreed with someone or did not disagree with, or you didn't agree or disagree with them. Imagine a situation in which you neither were bothered by heat or cold. You were not bothered by the economy going up or down. You were just not bothered by anything, no matter what happened. What would your experience of life be like? Spiritual teachers have been taking us in this direction for a long time. You'll find that even in the first verses of Bhagavad Gita, the same statement is made that happiness and distress, heat and cold are like the winter and summer seasons. They appear and disappear in due course of time, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. It also goes on to talk about how we should be able to consider all different things, whether a person is the lowest of humans or the highest of humans, a saint or a sinner, be able to consider them equal, or to consider dirt and gold as equal. And the truth is that we have a very hard time doing that. Why? Because we have this mind here is constantly having preferences and likes and dislikes. And because of that, we learn to value certain things and discard other things. We learn to make certain people our friends, and we learn to make other people either our enemies, or we avoid them, or we dislike them, or whatever else it might be. But without a mind that is constantly doing all that, we would not have any such experience. And so spirituality actually begins from this point where the mind calms down and all its busy-making activities of giving meaning to the world, interpreting things, trying to understand things, just calm down. And then we enter into a space where the mind is no longer making the comparisons and judgments and criticisms and distinctions that it used to make. And we're able to enjoy everything. If that's an experience you're looking for, the Bhagavatam will tell us a lot more about it. So let's dive deeper into it and see what there is here. So here we are on Canto 3, chapter number 4. And we're going to first begin with the part where these are Krishna's last moments on earth. Krishna, as you've been hearing about, is the supreme being who was here 3000 BC, 5,000 years ago. And unlike any other messenger, any other prophet that came along, and any other being that came here, he's perhaps the only one that declared unequivocally that he is the supreme being himself, incarnated, to show us what it's like to be with God, and also to help us get free of a lot of the miscreants and troublemakers that were there in the world at that time, and we have them still now, but there needs to be a cleansing or a reckoning from time to time. So, Krishna was in his last moments here. We've been following along from the time of the Bhagavad Gita till now. So these are the last moments when he's on the earth, and he's staged it in such a way for the exit of his entire family and now for himself. So his family is gone, his brother Balaram has left, and Krishna decided to leave his capital Dwarka. It's an island city just off the west coast of India. And from Dwarka, he got on his chariot and rode out away from the city to the banks of the river Saraswati. It's a long ways off. And being tired, he got off from the chariot at some point and sat down under a young banyan tree. And as he was sitting there with his right foot on his left thigh, he looked cheerful. Meanwhile, his friend Uddhava, dear friend who had been with him ever since he came to Dwarka and set up his own capital, Krishna was the king over there. His friend Uddhava, unable to bear the separation from his dear beloved friend, followed him. And also a great sage named Maitreya, knowing that this time had come, teleported himself to that spot. Now, great sages and rishis at the time of the Vedas were able to do things like that. Today we have people talking about, what we call that, remote viewing. They were doing it, and they were actually transporting themselves physically there into a different location just by thinking about it. That was the power of meditation. That is the power of the kind of meditation that was practiced at the time. And so Maitreya Muni also appeared on the scene. And there's a scene here where it shows Uddhava sitting at Krishna's feet. Krishna's on the right, and Uddhava's kneeled in front of him. He's got a bunch of questions, and the sage Maitreya is in the background. And they're sitting under a banyan tree. So, Krishna says to Uddhava, I know that in lifetimes past you had desired my association. This is an interesting statement. I know that in lifetimes past. How does Krishna know what happened in lifetimes past? Well, actually he gives us a hint about that in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, many, many lives both you and I have passed. I remember all of them, but you do not. And that's the fact. We don't remember our previous lifetimes, and so we think this life is all there is. But if you could remember all the lives you've spent and all the different ways in which you've done things. One of the things I found, because I practiced past life regression as a profession for many years and continue to do so, I found that all of us have had incredible lifetimes. We've done wonderful things and we've done horrible things. We have been saints and sinners. We have done every possible thing you could imagine. So if you think your life right now is horrible, well, there may be karma you're going through right now. And if you think your life is good, there might be karma you're going through right now. But all of it is part of this game called life. And in this game, there are many things that occur. Much of that we don't remember. We don't remember the earlier episodes. We do know about this one. You might somewhat remember your childhood, but even now, you may not remember what it was like to be in your mother's womb. You may not remember what it was like to be a young child of the age of 1 or 2 or 3. Some rare people do, but for the most part, we don't. Right? So there's so much we've forgotten, and there's some things that we remember. But all of that remembering is just here. Just fragments of memory, bits and pieces and fragments of little things that we still remember from another time. But really speaking, life is not about what you remember. Life is not about what happened. Life is not about what will happen. Life is about what's happening right now. And so in this moment where Krishna is talking to Uddhav, he says that in lifetimes past you desired my association. He desired to be with God. Have you ever had such a desire? Maybe you have desired to be with someone who you thought was a wonderful person, maybe a friend, maybe a lover, maybe someone who you thought was very admirable, someone you could learn something from. But imagine the idea of wanting to be closely associated with God, to be the friend of God. Well, Uddhav had such a desire. And Krishna says, I accepted you as my friend. So it's possible, as you see here, that one can have a friendship with God. One can have any kind of relationship, in fact, with God. And that's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be something impersonal. God doesn't have to be some guy in the clouds who you sit down and worship or bow to in a temple or a church or a mosque. God doesn't have to be someone who is just your father. God can be your buddy, your friend, your mate, your lover, your partner, your whatever you want God to be, your child. Hey, name it. So he says, due to your pure, unflinching devotion to me. Wow, that's another interesting term. Pure, unflinching devotion. Have you ever felt a sense of devotion towards something? Did you ever have an unflinching devotion, like a devotion to something or someone that wouldn't shake no matter what happened? Whoa. Was it to a cause? Was it to a business? Was it to a person? And if so, how did that feel? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know. I'd love to know what your experience has been like when you were devoted to something. Were you devoted to, well, the one thing everyone's devoted to, I think, is their mind, believing it, fulfilling its desires, doing what it says, obeying it. We're all devoted to our mind, aren't we? And how's that working out for you? Probably not so well. So Krishna says, due to your pure, unflinching devotion to me, I accepted you as my friend. And I want you to know that your present life will be your last. And after it is over, you will leave the universe of conditioned entities and go to my transcendental abode, Vaikuntha. I'll talk to you about Vaikuntha in just a minute. But look at this. Because he had this desire to be with the ultimate being of all, like many of us, we seek some ideal partner and some ideal mate that we could be with. But think about trying to have God as that person of your ultimate devotion and friendship and desire. And now, having had that association, having had that friendship, being told that your present life will be your last. You mean no more suffering, no more coming back, no more being part of the cycle of birth and death? That's right. And after that, where will you go? You will leave the universe of conditioned entities. That's where all of us live, right? We're all conditioned. And go to my transcendental abode, Vaikuntha. What is he talking about? Vaikuntha, the transcendental abode. Let's take a look. That transcendental abode of Krishna can be found here. That's right. That's an artist's depiction of what the spiritual world looks like. That this is the light, and within the light are innumerable planets. And in all of them, these are the Vaikuntha planets. And in these Vaikuntha planets are different forms of Vishnu. And in the ultimate, the highest planet of them all, you'll see is on the right side, where you have a lotus flower. And within that lotus flower is the planet of Krishna himself. So what is the significance of these Vaikuntha planets? That is that there is no more birth, death, old age, and disease. In the Vaikuntha planets, we live forever. We have eternal bodies. We have spiritual bodies, not material bodies, not physical bodies, but spiritual bodies. And those spiritual bodies are engaged in Leela, in pastimes with the divine, with God. And in that Leela, we have the opportunity for all kinds of wonderful pastimes. And last time we talked about Leela and pastimes. And now the spiritual world, that's what we go there for. Not to sit down and, be bored with some harp playing angels, but rather to have fun and games and to play and to wish and to create and to have wonderful experiences. Because that's what all of us long for. You could choose to merge into the light, yes, absolutely, but then there's nothing you can do there. You're just one with the light, and that's it, right? End of story. But otherwise, you could go into the Vaikuntha planets, and particularly into the planet of Krishna, Goloka, Vrindavan it is called. And in that lotus-like planet, experience Leela or pastimes with God. Pastimes of fun, of laughter, of joy, of dancing, of singing, of playfulness, of romance, you name it. Yes, exactly. It's all there for you. And Krishna's been waiting for us to come back to him. Uddhav continues asking Krishna now, begins to ask Krishna. On hearing this, he says, I spoke with great affection, my words failed and turned into tears, and the hairs on my body erupted. This is a symptom of ecstasy, ecstatic bhav, as it is called, of feelings of loving ecstasy happening within the body. Sometimes in kirtan, people experience this. Sometimes when they are in the peak of their loving devotion to God, they experience this in bhakti. This ecstasy is like samadhi for the meditator. It is a peak state that is experienced on hearing about the divine, about God, about Krishna, about his Leela. My dear Krishna, Uddhav says, those who engage in serving you easily get what they desire. Dharma, right? Religiosity, or artha, wealth, kama, the enjoyment of the senses, and moksha, liberation. But he says, I only wanted to engage in loving service to you. I didn't want any of those things. I only wanted to engage in loving service to you. Why does this matter? Because there was nothing he wanted from Krishna. You see, when we love someone and we want nothing from them except to love and be loved, that is pure love. But when we love them and we have an agenda, we want something from them, we want them to give us a certain security, a safety, we want some kind of a possessions, or we want some kind of situation that we can have with them, whether that is from a male perspective or female perspective. The point is we want something from them. And you might say, I want nothing from this person, but when they pull away what they've been giving you and you no longer get it, and then you say, I no longer love this person, well, then you wanted something because that something was taken away and now you no longer love them. So did you indeed love them, or did you love what they were giving you? It's an important point to ponder. But when one comes to God, invariably people want something. Usually it's that, God, take away my miseries, take away my suffering, make me feel better, make me feel happy, give me wealth, give me a partner, give me this, give me that, right? But what if you wanted nothing except to love and be loved? Now imagine, this is the kind of love Uddhav had for Krishna. He says, I wanted nothing. You could have easily given me everything I wanted, but I wanted nothing except you. Imagine if you're a very rich person, a king, and somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to be your friend, but they've got a secret agenda. It's not going to feel so good, is it? But if they've got no agenda, and if they really love you for who you are, and if they want to be your friend because of who you are, not because of what you have, or not because of what you'll give them, or not because of what's in it for them, well then, now you know you have a real, genuine friend and a real, genuine lover. Think about it. So that was the case of Uddhava. Uddhava was a great devotee of Krishna. He says, and now he goes into a point where he feels bewildered, because, you can love God, but it doesn't mean you're not going to be bewildered. There's so many things that are bewildering about this world, and there's so many things that are bewildering about God. So he says, even great sages become bewildered when they see that you engage in work, although you are free from all desires. So Krishna comes to this world, that is work. He helps, with all his Leela, he helps the armies, fight, and had all these people wiped out who were creating a disturbance on the planet. He did so many things, set up an entire kingdom, manage all of that. He says, it's bewildering to me that you engage in work, although you are free from all desires. So you desire nothing, and yet you're engaged in all this. Most of us work because we desire something. But now imagine working when you have no desire for anything. And that is actually the art of work. To work without attachment to the results, without particularly wanting some outcome, just to work for the sake of work, to work because of the joy of doing what we love to do. That is real work. Then he continues, that you take birth even though you are unborn, that you once fled from an enemy even though you are the controller of invincible time, and that you enjoy household life surrounded by many women even though you are completely satisfied in yourself. He has no need to be with any partner. He's completely satisfied within the self, and yet enjoys the company of so many lovers, in this case his wives. Although there is no limit to your perfect knowledge, yet you called me for consultation as if you were bewildered, although you are never bewildered. This act of yours bewilders me. So all of these things, if you notice, they are dualities that he's talking about. That even though you have no desire, yet you work. Even though you're never born, yet you take birth. Even though, yet. So when you have two things that are in contrast to each other, it's very bewildering for the mind. If you look at two political parties, you'll find yourself, well, should I take the side of this party or should I take the side of that party? If you hear people are religious and people are atheists, you'll say, well, which side should I belong to? People believe in this or believe in that. Which one should I believe in? I don't know. I'm bewildered. Then maybe you'll go and research it and maybe you'll try to find out more. But that's still in the realm of duality. And whatever side you choose, you will have chosen one area, and that one area will become the cause of your suffering. Your happiness will one day turn into unhappiness. Every time you choose something, the opposite is going to show up. If you have a coin, and in that coin you choose heads, along with heads comes tails. Right? The opposite is automatically there. The distance between this side and the opposite side, that distance is time. So if you look at one side, heads, well, the journey between heads and tails is time. Between happiness and unhappiness, it is only time. It is only time that takes us between wealth and losing everything. That takes us from youth to old age, that takes us from one situation to its opposite. Whenever you choose one and that one gives you pleasure, the opposite of that automatically comes about, and that opposite will now give you displeasure or unhappiness or suffering. To become free is to become free of both opposites, of all aspects of duality. Then we become free. But we'll learn about that a little more as we go along. So Uddhav says, then I asked him, Krishna, to enlighten me about himself, and he instructed me about his transcendental nature. Thereafter I came here. He's now gone further, Uddhav, because Krishna has left the planet. So I came here feeling very aggrieved due to separation. I am heading to Badrik Ashram in the Himalayas, as he told me. Uddhav was the only one amongst Krishna's family and friends who remained on earth because he had transcended. Uddhav had transcended the modes of material nature. That means he had become free of the influence of this world. And now he was competent to disseminate knowledge of the Supreme Godhead to everyone. And then he went about teaching and sharing the wisdom that he had gained from his time with Krishna. Vidur then went to Maitreya to learn more about the knowledge Krishna had imparted before leaving this world. So regarding Krishna's leaving the world, I think it's an important piece to understand. And I think I'm going to take a moment here for you to take a look at some pictures that I put together. So this is Krishna lying down after he talked to Uddhav, and he was shot in the foot by a hunter who thought that foot was a deer. Now, it's a very implausible tale, and certainly it's very difficult to think of a foot being a deer, but okay. And then again, if one is shot in the foot, it's very implausible that one would die. But that's how the Leela was. Krishna wanted an exit. He wanted a way to get out of here. So this hunter came up to Krishna and apologized and said, I'm so sorry, because this is what, once he had shot and Krishna had not yet left. He says, I'm so sorry. What had I done? How could I possibly do this? And Krishna said, no. It was part of the Leela. I wanted this to happen. I needed a way out. I arranged for this. Thank you for your service. And as a blessing, you can come with me to Vaikuntha. So Krishna blessed him. In fact, he showed him his form as Vishnu. And after that, took him off with him to Vaikuntha as he left the world. Now we come to further talks with Maitreya. And this is the talks that of Vidura now sitting with the great sage Maitreya. Maitreya had been there with Krishna when Krishna was leaving, and he had overheard the talks. And in fact, Krishna had talked with him directly as well. So now, the sage Maitreya is going to speak to Vidura. Vidura had come from Haridwar, had come to Haridwar on the banks of the Ganga. If you've ever been to Haridwar, it is a most incredible place on the banks of the Ganga, something definitely worth experiencing in this lifetime. And there with Maitreya, Maitreya had been called the great fathomless sage, meaning he was so deep, so wise, so incredible that he was referred to as fathomless. Right? You couldn't fathom the extent of this man's wisdom. So Vidur asked him, "O great sage, everyone in this world engages in karmic activities to attain happiness, but one finds neither satiation nor the mitigation of distress." Let's read this again. Everyone in the world engages in karmic activities to attain happiness. Right? Why else do you engage in work? Why else do you engage? Because you want happiness. But he says one finds neither satiation, we don't feel satisfied, nor do we attain the mitigation of distress. See, we want our suffering to go away. We don't want to have to be hungry or thirsty or without clothing or shelter or so many things that we enjoy in the world. But we do not get that. We get some relief, but it is not permanent. It is not lasting. So he continues, Vidur continues, on the contrary, one is only aggravated by such activities. In other words, we have to work hard, and there's so many things we have to deal with along the way, from the traffic to the taxes to the people who are there and we have to interact with. Somebody's in a bad mood, somebody's doing something that we don't like, and now it agitates us, and we've got our own mind in the whole process. So we become aggravated by such activities. So Vidur says, please therefore give us direction on how one should live for real happiness. We are going to get the answer today, and I will come to it quickly. How can he who is situated in the heart of everyone, that is God who is situated in the heart of everyone, be pleased to impart from within knowledge of the absolute truth through pure devotion? Did you know that God is seated within your heart? People ask, where is God? God is everywhere. All around us is God. In every atom, in every particle of this universe is God. The energy of this universe is the energy of God. And yet, God sits within us. Now, the interesting part is this. We all seek knowledge. We all seek wisdom. Where do we get it? Most of us turn to books. Most of us turn to people. But the ultimate knowledge, the ultimate wisdom, the highest source is when you can start listening to that quiet inner voice, the voice of the Param Atma, the great soul, the presence of God within you. When you can quiet your mind enough to hear that voice, because it is soft, because it is gentle, and because it requires you to be a blank slate. It requires you to come with no preconceived ideas, to listen without anything going on here. So that is not, sounds difficult to do, but Vidur is asking, how can I get to that place? Kindly tell me about the Supreme Being who is independent, desireless, and the controller of all energies, who is the master of all mystic powers and the proprietor of everything. Our minds are never satisfied completely, although we continually hear of his transcendental activities. Just like all of you who are here, never tire. I'm always amazed that you're here, because the fact of the matter is there's so much more to do in your life, and yet you're here, and yet you're listening. And that tells you not of the power of what I'm speaking, but of the power of what is in the Bhagavatam. This message, this knowledge, this wisdom is timeless. And one who has developed ruchi, or a taste for it, never tires of hearing about the transcendental activities of God and his devotees. Vidur continues in his questions, and he says, who in human society can be satisfied without hearing sufficient talk of him, whose lotus feet are the sum total of all places of pilgrimage, and who is worshipped by great sages and devotees? Such topics can cut off one's bondage to worldly attachment simply by entering the holes of one's ears. This last line is so important. Such topics, hearing about these topics, can cut off bondage to worldly attachment simply by entering the holes of one's ears. Imagine the power of this knowledge that you're getting here. Then he continues to say, one who is anxious to engage constantly in hearing such topics, this is known as Krishna Katha. This is talk, Katha, about Krishna. One who is anxious to engage constantly in hearing such topics gradually increases his indifference towards all other things. Such constant remembrance of the lotus feet of Sri Krishna by the devotee who has achieved transcendental bliss vanquishes all miseries without delay. O sage, persons who due to karmic activities are averse to the topics of transcendence are pitiable. I see how their duration of life is spoiled by eternal time, while they involve themselves in philosophical speculation, theoretical goals, and different rituals. If you look at it, everything we do right now is based on either some goals that we have, or some speculation, philosophical speculation about life, or about some rituals that we engage in, whether those rituals are eating, drinking, joining our friends, going to movies. They're all rituals, right? So basically the culprit is time. We use our time in these activities. But if we were to use our time in hearing about the divine, we would become free from all attachment, we would transcend this world, we would transcend time. I often find that in the course of these talks here, time passes by and I have no idea how much, oh my God, it's been a whole hour now. It seems like a few minutes. Vidur continues, O friend of the distressed, the glories of the Supreme Lord alone can do good for people all over the world. Just as bees collect honey from flowers, kindly describe the essence of all topics, the topics of Sri Krishna. So I think it was worthwhile to present this image for us to meditate on, the bees as they gather the essence of the flowers, the nectar from the flowers, and turn it into honey. The great sage Maitreya honored Vidura. So this kind of questioning and answering is so beautiful. This is the kind of questions you ask from a highly evolved being, and these are the kind of answers you get. Maitreya says to Vidura, he says that in your past life, Vidura, you were Yamaraj, the god of death. And you were an eternal associate of Krishna. And Krishna has left instructions for you. Then Maitreya began to speak about the greatest welfare of all people. He spoke about how the Supreme Being, the undisputed proprietor of everything, existed before the manifest universe as the witness. The word in Sanskrit is drishta. Drishta means the witness. Now we've heard of witness consciousness, but the ultimate witness who existed before and even existence came about is the Supreme Being, or Krishna. And then he says, at that time, as he was witnessing everything, or rather witnessing the nothingness, at that time he felt imperfect or insufficient. And Prabhupada explains, insufficient like a husband feeling lonely in the absence of his wife, or whichever way the genders go. There's nothing specific to that. But the point is that when you feel lonely in the absence of your beloved, in the same way, he began to feel the absence of all of us. He who is the witness or the seer, and he is the witness or the seer, and the material energy is the seen. He is the cause, and the material energy is the effect. He is the Purusha, the masculine, and the material energy is Shakti, or the feminine. So you see, a lot of times we get caught up into our roles as masculine and feminine, but actually all of us, according to the Vedas, are feminine. All of us, male, female, everyone. entire material energy, which is the building blocks of all the universes, the material energy, is feminine. It is God who is masculine. He is the enjoyer, and the material energy is created to be enjoyed by Him. So in that sense, God is the Purusha. Purusha means the enjoyer, the masculine. And the Prakriti, or is Shakti, is the feminine. He is the internal energy, or internal potency, and the material energy is the external energy, or external potency, known as Maya. This whole world is known as Maya, or illusion. So the external energy is the illusion, and the internal energy, the energy of God, is actually the substance. One is the substance, the other is the shadow. One is the reality, the other is the illusion. By the interactions of eternal time, he impregnates the material energy, which appears as the Mahatattva, the great causal truth, and manifests as the many forms of the would-be living entity. So now they use the analogy of the divine, or God, impregnating the material energy, which then manifests as the many forms of the would-be living entities, all the species and all the living entities that we see around us. The Mahatattva, that is what emerges from the material energy, then gives rise to the false ego, the three modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Then it interacts with the material energy along with electricity and time to form the sky, which gives rise to sound, the air, which gives rise to touch, and light, which gives rise to sight, and water, which gives rise to taste, and earth, which gives rise to smell. All of this is made possible by the touch of the glance of the Supreme Being. Touch of the glance. So actually, it is said that the senses of the divine all act the same way. Touch and sight are not separate. When he sees, he's also touching. When he's touching, he's also seeing. There is no difference. In the prayers of Brahma, this is mentioned. It then talks about how the demigods prayed and said at the time of creation to Krishna, he said, "Your lotus feet are like umbrellas for surrendered souls to protect them from all the miseries of material existence. The living entities in the material world can never have any happiness because they are overwhelmed by three kinds of miseries." Now, if you remember our classes on the Gita, you'll remember three kinds of miseries were miseries caused by our own mind and body. We get plenty of that. There are miseries that are caused by other living beings. Yeah, it could be people, could be animals, could be bugs, could be whatever, other living beings. And miseries caused by nature, the heat, the cold, the weather, and all of the stuff life throws at us, the quality of air or whatever else might be. So three kinds of miseries that we all experience. Miseries caused by our own body and mind, miseries caused by other living beings, and then miseries caused by nature. So he says, it's very difficult to be happy when you're subjected to all of this. Persons who are entangled by undesirable eagerness for the temporary body and kinsmen, who are bound by thoughts of I and mine, are unable to see your lotus feet, although your lotus feet are situated within their own bodies. So interesting. God is situated within us, and yet we're not able to see. The medicine is right here. The relief is right here. The answer is right here. And we're not able to feel or see or experience it because we're so caught up in our eagerness to enjoy the body and the people and the things of the world. We are bound by thoughts of I and mine. And that's essentially it. I and mine. That's at the heart of our suffering. If you didn't care about I, then you wouldn't care about what anybody said to you or what they did to you. And if you didn't care about mine, you wouldn't care about what they did to anything or anyone else, especially the things you call yours. Because the reality is, I is an illusion, and the ego is an illusion, the body is an illusion that was created by this world. And everything I have is also an illusion created by the world. So I know it's not easy to do, and I get that it's a tremendous struggle, but at least we need to have some roadmap of where we're trying to get to. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying I'm there. I'm saying we're all in this together. And what we can do is encourage each other to see through the illusion of the world. What we can do is help each other through these challenges that the world throws at us. And when we are in illusion, to help each other get out of it. The demigods then continued, simply by hearing about your lotus feet with eagerness and devotion, and by meditating upon them within the heart, one at once becomes enlightened. By taking shelter of the sanctuary of your lotus feet, one attains the Vaikuntha in the spiritual sky. O Supreme Self, please give us who are created in the beginning from the material energy. Give us your kind directions on how we should act. Kindly award us your perfect knowledge and potency so we may render you service in the different departments of subsequent creation. Because they're just about to get involved with creating the universes and managing them. So that's why they're making these prayers. But we, on the other hand, can call out to God to guide us in how to manage our affairs and how to deal with the world and how to be free from it. Ultimately, it's about developing an attachment, not just to the things of the world, but to an attachment to hearing about, chanting, speaking about, and ultimately serving God. All right, we now come to a very interesting part of this, and the chapter we're reading is chapter 7, Further Inquiries by Vidura. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of a journey here. I'm going to take you through something that I've created to help you understand what I call non-dual thinking. Now, duality, of course, is the world that we live in, right? The mind is dualistic by nature. It sees the world as right and wrong, good and bad, positive, negative, either or, black and white. And unfortunately, because of that, because of its dualistic nature, it tends to be divisive. It tends to divide us. It tends to create negativity. That which we call negativity arises from the mind. Depression, anxiety, fear. It also creates this sense of positivity, and we tend to have this kind of toxic positivity these days where people are over-optimistic. You got to be positive about everything. You got to feel good about everything. No. And then we tend to become over-optimistic or sometimes careless and, lacking empathy. And so the idea is to stop being caught up in your mind with the ideas of whether you agree or disagree, like or dislike, right or wrong, good or bad. Recognize, label these as constructs. Neither get caught up in do not get caught up in either extreme of positive or negative. Because for every negative, there is a positive, as we were saying earlier, and for every positive, there is a negative. They're both opposite sides of the same coin. If the mind accuses me of being a failure, then automatically I'm also a success in some area of my life. So the way to look at this, the way to understand this, I can put it down as a single slide over here, which I'd like you to maybe take a picture of and meditate on. Whatever the mind says, understand this. This and its opposite are simultaneously true. So whatever you're thinking and its opposite are simultaneously true. You may have different opinions. One person may have one opinion, the other may have the opposite opinion. But they're all simultaneously true. And a simple mathematical way to put that would be +1 minus 1 equals to 0. Which is equal to infinity or infinite possibilities. Another way to do it from algebra would be +a minus a, right? Again, bring you back to 0 or infinity. 0 means nothing, a vacuum, openness, and from nothing comes everything. So the idea is this: to watch your thoughts. If you want to develop the idea of non-dual thinking, watch your thoughts. Do not engage in them. Treat them as possibilities and not facts. And the way to stay free of them is when your mind tells you something, you just say to it, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. right? Shrug your shoulders. That's an easy way to get past its control of you. Observe your thoughts and do not engage. Let the thoughts come and drift away. Breathe them out. Basically, non-dual thinking means to go beyond the dualistic, polarized thinking of the mind, to come to a place of freedom from the mind and its control over you. To think in terms of, some people say both and, or yes and be able to look at all different possibilities rather than be caught up in either or thinking. And the more you can see multiple possibilities and conclude nothing and extract the best from all of them, the more free and happy you're going to find yourself. Try and find what works instead of finding what's right or wrong or what's true or false. Vidur then continues, how does the unchangeable Supreme Being perform activities within the changing material nature? By the way, you'll notice everything that's now going to be said to you, or I'm going to read from, is this kind of opposites. And as I'm reading it to you, try and practice not getting caught up into any one side. Because if you get caught up on any side, you're going to find yourself confused and bewildered just as Vidur is. But if you learn to just observe the two different ideas, opposite contradictory ideas, simultaneously, you will have begun the practice of non-dual thinking. So Vidur says, I'll go back here again, how does the unchangeable Supreme Being perform activities within the changing material nature? He says, boys are enthusiastic to play with various diversions because of desire. But he, the Supreme, has no desire because he is self-satisfied and detached from everything at all times. Then he says, the pure soul is pure consciousness and is never out of consciousness, either due to circumstances, time, situations, dreams, or other causes. How then does he become engaged in the nescience or the darkness of this world? So the soul is consciousness, is never out of that state of, is always in that state of pure consciousness. And yet how does it get involved and caught up in the darkness of this world? The super soul, the presence of God within us, is situated in every living being's heart. Why then do living entities engage in activities that result in misfortune and misery? You see the contradictions here? O great and learned one, my mind is greatly illusioned by the distress of this nescience, this darkness, and I therefore request you to clear it up. Maitreya said, some claim that the Supreme is overcome by illusion and yet remains unconditioned. This is against all logic. The living entity suffers because of his self-identity, which is the ego, right? We suffer because of our ego, because of our self-identity, because who we think we are. I, who I think I am. We suffer because of that. And then I, of course, has things that it has, which is mine. So we suffer because of our self-identity, our ego, but he has no factual background. But you know, the ego has no fact, there's no factual reality to the ego because it's all made up. The entire egoic sense of self that we have of man or woman or fat or thin or ugly or beautiful or smart or stupid is all made up. He compares it here to a person who dreams when he sees his head cut off. Well, if your head was cut off, you wouldn't be seeing anything, right? But in your dream, you imagine your head got cut off. Then he compares it to the moon reflected on water, appears to the seer to tremble due to being associated with the quality of water. So the self associated with matter appears to be qualified as matter. We think we are this thing, right? That's what he's meaning. We think we are this. We think this is the self. This mind, this body, this our life story, our opinions, our views. We think this is us. And so just like the moon reflected on water appears to tremble due to being associated with the quality of water, so the self associated with matter appears to think of itself as matter. Then he continues, but that misconception of self-identity can be diminished gradually by the mercy of the Supreme Being, Vasudeva or Krishna, through the process of bhakti or devotion. When the senses are satisfied in the Supreme and merge in Him, all miseries are completely vanquished, as after a sound sleep. Simply by chanting and hearing of his transcendental name, form, etc., one can achieve the cessation of unlimited miserable conditions. What to speak of those who have attained attraction for serving the flavor of his lotus feet. So the beginning is this process of listening, speaking and chanting the name and the glories and meditating on the form of God. That's the beginning. But then there comes a point where there is an attraction. One develops a taste. One has now developed a greater taste for this than for the world. It's not that we need to give up the world, but rather we need to develop a higher taste, a taste for something that is more attractive, more beautiful, more incredible, more satisfying. And that is what happens as we continue listening, as we continue hearing and speaking about and chanting the names of God. So we develop a taste and attraction for the flavor of the dust of his lotus feet. Vidur said, "O powerful sage, all my doubts have now been removed by your convincing words. Disturbances to the conditioned soul have no other basis than the movements of the external energy Maya. The fool and the transcendentalist enjoy happiness." Very powerful statement here. The fool and the transcendentalist enjoy happiness, whereas persons between them suffer the material pangs. Please listen very carefully. There are two kinds of people in this world who are happy: the fool and the transcendentalist, or the wise person. These two enjoy, the fool enjoys happiness because the person has got literally no mind, right? So they're happy. I think they're the queen of Sheba, or they're this, or they're that, and I don't know if they're happy, honestly, but I'm going to assume that they are. The fool and the transcendentalist enjoy happiness, whereas persons between them suffer the material pangs. So you can choose, do I want to be a fool or do I want to be a transcendentalist? And another very interesting thing is also to accept that you are a fool, because in fact we know nothing. We are nothing. So if we can begin our life from that place, from that point of humility, that point of nothingness, I am nothing, I know nothing, then the ego has no place to stand. And that's another way of understanding the fool. Be the fool, right? And you will enjoy happiness. In the final lines he says, "I can understand that this material manifestation is without substance, although it appears real. I am confident that by serving your feet it will be possible for me to give up this false idea." So with that we end with the chapter 7 of the Bhagavatam. I'm going to open this up to questions, see if you guys have anything you've been writing about or thinking about, and I'd love to know your thoughts. Switch it over. Okay. Let's see. So any questions that you might have? Cindy's asking a question here. She says, "Once in a state of devotion, I desired to wash the feet of the beloved. A voice said," oh, this is so beautiful. Let me bring it up here. A voice said, "You must be willing to wash those of others as you would mine." I was deeply humbled about love towards others. Yes, Cindy, this is so profound and so important to understand. We cannot love God without loving the creation, without loving all creatures, without loving all beings. It is so important to understand that the process of loving God begins with the process of opening our heart and loving all that is, right? If you're going to resist what is, the world, and the circumstances and the situations that come your way, if you're going to be judgmental to people or to yourself, then you cannot begin the journey to loving God. The first step is really to opening your heart up to all of life And as we begin that process, we begin our journey to loving God. First, begin to see God in Brahman, in the energy around you, then within yourself and within everyone. And gradually you will come to that Supreme Being who is one without a second. One more statement from Cindy. For one who has chosen devotion of love towards others is the same as devotion to the One. Duality dissolves, yet it is multiplied. Lovely. Thank you so much for that. Yes, duality dissolves when you begin to realize that they are no different than you are, and you are no different than they are. At the same time, having done that, we also need to know that there is more. It's just like when people want to merge into the light. But when you merge into the light, know there's more out there. Know that when you found God in everything and everyone, that there is still that being who you can have a relationship with. So that's the full picture. It's not just about... So for example, for those who follow the Bible, this is actually there. They just don't look at it. They don't realize it. They think, oh, only I need to love thy neighbor as thyself, right? They think that loving your neighbor means only loving someone who's of the same faith. No, it means loving everyone, no matter what faith they're from. And it doesn't just mean loving every person. It means loving every creature, including all the animals, and not harming them or killing them or eating them, right? It means loving everything and everyone, including the trees, including the plants, including the earth, everything. So love thy neighbor as thyself. And then in the same spirit, and so of course it includes yourself as well, and then from there you come to the place of loving God. Of course you can start from the place of loving God and come to loving everyone. That's fine too. It often works easier that way, but some people get stuck in the idea of just loving God, and they forget that, hey, you can't love God without loving everything else that is from God. You can't love me but not love my dog. It doesn't work like that. You can't love me but not love my kid, right? Even as human beings, we have these things. You want to be in love with someone, you're in a relationship with someone where you love everything about them. And so it is with God. You can't expect to love God and then be fighting with people of different religions. This is nonsense. This is not what the way of God. This is the way of arrogance, and it's the way of stupidity. It is the way of the mind and the ego. It is not the way of God. And so they have given God a bad name, bad rap, by their own misbehavior and distortions that they've created. But we shouldn't blame God for that. That was never the intention. All right, any more questions? Any last thoughts? Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, everybody that is here. I want to thank every one of you that has been here with me, supporting me. I love you all and appreciate all of you for your presence, for your support, for all the ways in which you've been here with me through this journey. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna. God bless everyone. Radhe Radhe.